Let's talk fantasy football trade values. Each day, we've been taking a look at about 5 players and looking at what it would take to trade for that player and what you could look to get if you wanted to trade that player away. I think one of the best things you can do if you're playing fantasy football is get past the concept of buy low, sell high. Such and such player just had a good game. Should I sell high? You should constantly be looking to gauge the values of your players and what your league mates might give you for them. So we're going to look at some real trades, and you might be surprised what some of these guys are getting traded for. The first player that we've got today is Rico Dowdle. I've pulled up the trade database here. This is fantasycalc.com. You have access to this. You can use their trade database to pull up real trades that have happened. So I'm going to limit this to just about no more than 5 assets in a trade because we're trying to gauge the value of one single player. So for Rico Dowdle, running back, weird start to the year, joined the Panthers in the offseason, but was behind Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard goes down. He takes over, looks good, but when Chuba Hubbard comes back, the team goes back to Chuba. That's normal. You see that in a lot of situations, but then they just decide actually Rico's better. And now it's only Rico, almost no split at all. Chuba getting very little work, and he's been about a top 15 running back. He's one of the most traded players recently. So let's look at some of these deals. Someone sent Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard the package, and they got Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's kind of a ridiculous one. I don't know that you could get Amon-Ra, but someone did it. Someone sent Rico Dowdle and got Javonte Williams. That's one I don't know why we do it. Are we just calling our shot, saying, I know Javonte Williams is better, or I know Rico Dowdle is better? That's another thing that you might want to just try to get a little bit better at when playing fantasy football. These guys are very similar. They're a very similar tier, and we don't know the future. If you think you can predict the future, if you view fantasy football as it's just parlays, well, then this is a trade for you where you're picking your guy. I don't necessarily think of it that way. I think we can do more with our trading, like do things in packages. Here's someone sent Rico Dowdle and they got Josh Allen and Kyle Monangai. Now, if you had lost a quarterback, I'm okay with a deal like this where you just switch to a very good one. You grabbed Rico Dowdle on waivers. Someone maybe drafted Josh Allen and Drake May, and they're looking to move on, and you got Kyle Monangai on top somehow. Here's a deal where someone sent Rico Dowdle. They got Pacheco and Johnston. I don't like that at all. On these trades, you can also just take a look on the side here, and it'll show the value. So I'll try to stick to some of those. Cross-positionally, Rico Dowdle for Jalen Waddle. I think that's okay. Running backs might have more positional value, but if you needed to make a swap for a receiver, the value there's okay. Here, similarly, and one that I like more, Rico Dowdle for Devontae Adams. I would have Devontae Adams in a tier ahead of someone like Jalen Waddle. T. Higgins, I might put around Jalen Waddle, but Devontae Adams has been really, really strong. We'll try to find a couple others on here. Here's another case of Rico Dowdle for Jalen Waddle, Rico Dowdle for Nico Collins, another guy that I like more than Jalen Waddle. Here, you could use Rico Dowdle to tier up, to package Rico Dowdle with Travis Kelce to massively upgrade at tight end. I would be really happy to do something like that if I had just lost Tucker Kraft or Dalton Kincaid. Here, Rico Dowdle and Chris Olave for Puka Nacua. I don't think you'll get this deal in your league, specifically for Puka, but it doesn't hurt to send something like this for Puka, for CeeDee Lamb, for JSN, for Justin Jefferson. Rico Dowdle and Chris Olave for any one of those guys, I would be pretty pleased. All right, let's move on to the next player. We've got Ashton Jeanty, a running back that was being drafted around the 1-2 turn in a 12-team league, and it's been a bit of a disappointment there. Since the bye, the team has started to look a little bit better. I mean, the Raiders are still going to be a bad team, but Jeanty is still usable. He's an RB2, somewhere between 12 and 16, I think, for the rest of the year. So let's take a look at some trades. Here's one that lines up. Ashton Jeanty for Bucky Irving and Deebo Samuel. Yeah, I could take the Bucky Irving side there. Ashton Jeanty just for Derrick Henry. It looks like, so this is saying the market still values Ashton ahead, and I might just go with Derrick Henry. Again, I don't do a ton of these, but I feel that the dip that we saw with Derrick Henry was really more related to injuries to the Ravens. And the dip and lack of production that we've seen from Ashton Jeanty is because the Raiders are in a perpetual state of injury. Like they're just bad. Not injury, but they're down to bad players. The Ravens got injured and started putting in bad players The Raiders only have bad players. So I might go with Derrick Henry there. Here's one, Ashton Jeanty. Well, that's kind of way off. Jeanty and McLaurin for Bo Nix, Marv, and Brees. You would take the down tier to Brees, move an injured Terry for an injured Marv, and bring in Bo. Not a ton of Ashton moves. Trevion Henderson and Wan'Dale Robinson. That would not be enough for me. Let's try to find one more. Ashton Jeanty and T. Higgins. Someone got CD Lamb, and it says it's pretty close. I would be fine with doing that up tier at this time of year. Once we're into week 11, past a lot of our bye weeks. Here, CD Lamb has had his bye. T. Higgins and Jeanty have had their bye. We'll start consolidating stuff. We don't need as much depth for buys. We just need a little bit of depth for injuries now. So let's move up to CD Lamb there. I'd be happy with that. The third player today, we've got Ladd McConkey. Wide receiver, slow start to the year. People maybe thought Quentin Johnson was taking over the role as the lead option. And now that we've seen about 10 games from the Chargers, it's evened out. Ladd's on top. Keenan Allen has a role. The offense is pretty solid. The wide receiving group is much better in 2025 than we thought it was going into 2024. If you remember back at the start of 2024, people were saying the Chargers had the worst wide receiver group. It's looked pretty good this year. So let's talk Ladd McConkey, Breece Hall for Josh Jacobs. I could do that. I think Ladd McConkey has gotten back to kind of the pre-draft value. We think he'll be about a wide receiver 1 on the high end, maybe a really solid wide receiver 2, back end wide receiver 1. Then we're moving Breece Hall, whose value I think dips without Garrett Wilson there, and then move to Josh Jacobs, who has been really solid. I don't know that I'm doing this on every team, but if this is the only consolidation move I could make, I could consider it. Let's look at Ladd McConkey, splitting that for Breece and Shakir. Kind of just said what I thought about Breece. Here's a package deal to get Ladd. Would I send Malik Washington, AJ Brown, and Terry McLaurin for Ladd McConkey? Yes. Yeah. Malik Washington is borderline droppable. AJ Brown has been a bit of a disappointment. And then Terry McLaurin, an extreme disappointment. If we could just lock that in and get more sure production from Ladd, I'm okay with that. For cross-positionally, people have sent Ladd McConkey for Jalen Warren, Ladd McConkey for Derrick Henry. Here's another Jalen Warren. Here's Aaron Jones, which I think is way outside the range. So this is the best example of why we look at this. We look at Ladd McConkey, we see him go for Jalen Warren, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones. I think you have a ranking of those guys, and I would guess that it's Henry, Warren, Jones. But in trades, he's gone for all of them. We see 2 for Warren. It's a small sample size, but that's about the crossover. Let's find one more for Ladd McConkey. Here's a package. Ladd McConkey for Bucky Irving and Ramondre Stevenson. We hope that Bucky Irving is back this week on Sunday. News reports are that he's practicing in camp for week 11. Ramondre Stevenson still has a role with the Patriots, I think, when he comes back. But if you need to make the cross-position swap, I think that one's fine. Let's take a look at T. Higgins. We've got another wide receiver, similar range. So we'll go a little bit quicker on this one. Here, T. Higgins for DeAndre Swift. You could probably make a similar deal with Ladd McConkey here. DeAndre Swift might be a little too cheap for Ladd. I don't want to make that deal, but you could. Here's another play we've talked about, T for Rico Dowdle. Here's T for Breece Hall. A lot more one-to-one swaps at wide receiver to running back, which I'm totally fine with. T for Quinshon Judkins. I'm not sure I understand that. Oh, no, sorry. My brain was thinking Quentin Johnson. No, T. Higgins for Quinshon Judkins. I really like that. So if you have T. Higgins, here are multiple receivers you could just swap him for. Again, the price will be the price in your league, but there's a lot of evidence that it could happen for you. Here's a package to get T. Higgins, AJ Brown, and Alec Pierce. If you're just worried about the downside of AJ Brown, he's had some bad games, and you just wanted to add in Alec Pierce and kind of lock this in to get a little bit safer production, I could understand that. The last player we've got, Patrick Mahomes. We bring up a quarterback in each one because there have been a lot of solid quarterbacks this year that kind of just showed up out of nowhere. Showed up later in drafts that were very cheap to get. Dak Prescott was drafted very late. Drake May was an 11th or 12th round pick. Justin Fields has been usable. Daniel Jones was undrafted. Jackson Dart, mostly undrafted. So let's take a look. If you have two of these guys, what can you do? I don't necessarily like a trade like this. Pat Mahomes for Jordan Love and Travis Etienne. I don't know why I mean, maybe I think that some of the value here for Jordan Love is going to be pretty low. We could pull up his value, yeah, 600, 569. We round that up to 600. So this is essentially Pat Mahomes for Travis Etienne. So for one running back crossover, I could make that swap. That's about where we would draft them today. Pat Mahomes and Ken Walker for Javonte Williams. I don't have any issues with that. So if you have multiple quarterbacks and you're trying to move them for a running back, we've seen Travis Etienne, and you could really send Pat Mahomes for just Travis Etienne. You don't need to bring back in Jordan Love like we saw on this one. You might need to add Ken Walker to get up to Javonte Williams, but I would be fine making that move. I'm not sure why someone did Pat Mahomes for Jordan Love. We'll ignore that one. Here, another running back, Patrick Mahomes for Rico Dowdle. And then we've seen Rico Dowdle get sent for Nico Collins, T. Higgins, Jalen Warren. So if you have Patrick Mahomes and you want a wide receiver, sometimes the best way is get a running back and then use that running back who we also covered today to just swap in a follow-up deal. Go Mahomes to Dowdle, Dowdle to Collins, Mahomes to Dowdle, Dowdle to Jalen Waddle. So I would be thinking about moves like that. And you can even reach out to the people before you make the first deal. Hey, I'm about to acquire Nico Collins, or I'm about to acquire Rico Dowdle. Would you swap Nico Collins for him? And then just make a deal in sequence. Scanning for anything else interesting with Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes and Downs for Drake May and Kamara. If you're just moving to a maybe more upside player with Drake May and swapping Downs to Kamara, you could also do moves like this with your quarterbacks where you're saying, I'm fine moving a guy within the same tier to do a position swap, move Downs to bring in a running back. So for some of the trades that I was saying earlier with, I don't really want to move running back for running back, I would do a 2-for-2 trade where I'm going running back for running back in a deal where I don't really worry about which guy I have. And then it lets me do a position swap here. So I'm not that worried if I have Mahomes or May, but it lets me send Josh Downs for Alvin Kamara. So you could look for trades like that as well. So we've got the 5 for today. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another set of 5 on YouTube. If this has helped you make trades or think about how you should be sending out trades, let me know with a like or a comment. I do typically respond to those. Some of them are harder to respond to, but anything that isn't just who do I start this week, we typically get to. If you have a question of who to start this week, we also have weekly rankings posted on YouTube as well, and they should show up on your screen. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next one.